All right, excellent. So today's plan, today we're going to talk about what the team has to offer to support student growth and how we can continue doing this work at home, talking about strategies to try around test anxiety and assessment anxiety. And then we'll close out with some announcements and reminders. So today I want to welcome to our presenters, and each of them will introduce themselves. So guys, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of our families this evening. My name is Lola Odukoya. I am on the academic acceleration team within the Office of Teaching and Learning. Joining me today are my colleagues, Jason and Luna. I'll let them introduce themselves. Mawuena is unable to join us today, so I'll pass it to Jason.
Hi, good evening. It's good to speak with you. I work on the academic acceleration team, and I manage elementary assessments and interventions. So over to you, Luna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luna, and I am joining the team as the UELIP intern for spring 2022.
So like Imelda mentioned, we are here today to talk about some of the assessments that your students may be taking during the spring. And so Imelda, take us away.
Okay, so first I will go over the different types of assessments that we have at DCPS. So assessments at DCPS are used to measure student academic growth and achievement for a variety of purposes. DCPS has 4 assessment categories, as we can see here on the slide: diagnostic, curriculum-based, summative, and college and career. Our team manages the diagnostic and curriculum-based assessments, and that will be the main focus for today. Diagnostic assessments are administered 3 times throughout the school year: beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. These assessments give students the opportunity to demonstrate growth on aligned standards. And so curriculum-based assessments are administered multiple times throughout the school year to give instructions a constant pulse on student learning. You may have heard of ANET and required curricular tasks, or RCT. These assessments measure student performance on grade level content and align to the pacing of the curriculum. Next slide please. So now we'll go over the assessments by grade level. The assessments shown on this slide are available for elementary students. First, we have Teaching Strategies Gold, which is for pre-K 3 to 4, then DIBELS for grades K through 2, TRC for grades K through 1, IReady Math Diagnostic for grades K through 5, Reading Inventory for grades 2 to 5, and finally ANET and ANET, ELA, and Math for grades 3 to 5. Your students may also take assessments that are specific to their school programming. For example, dual language students take the STAR Spanish Language Arts Assessment. Next slide, please. So next we have the assessments available to our middle school students, all of which are administered to grades 6 through 8. We have IReady Math Diagnostic, Reading Inventory, NWEA Science, SAGE Social Studies, and ANET, ELA, and Math. This slide shows assessments for high school students and specific to their courses. So we have Reading Inventory for grades 9 through 12. NWEA Math is specific to Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 only. NWEA Science is specific to biology, and SAGE Social Studies is only administered in 9th grade. And the last one is ANET, ELA, and Math. So let's talk a little bit about what might happen before the assessment. Students will complete end-of-year assessments starting in mid-May this year. You may see symptoms of test anxiety as we get closer to that time. According to the American Psychological Association, test anxiety is a type of performance anxiety that can stem from fear of failure, pressure to do well, or poor previous testing experiences. So some of the test anxiety symptoms that you may see can be both physical or emotional, including but not limited to headaches, lightheadedness, helplessness, or difficulty concentrating. In order to help your learners, here are some tips that you can use for before the assessment. So you can start by asking your learner where their fear is coming from. Asking the question will provide valuable clues as to what will help calm a student down. You can also keep things in perspective. You can share this perspective with your students regularly, offering gentle reminders that every test is just a test and that no test defines how smart, successful, or worthy students are. You can also empower your child with simple strategies to reduce anxiety, such as encouraging your learners to participate in simple, deep breathing exercises, using positive self-talk and mantras, or doing seated stretches to release tension once the test is underway. Also, you can coordinate with your child's teacher on effective test-taking strategies, focus on the positives, and practice with the pressure off. After the assessment is complete, please plan to review student scores. Student scores are released in different ways based on the assessment. However, it is important to remember that their scores or results do not define your learner. It is only a part of our whole child lens. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jason, who will go over a sample IReady math diagnostic data report.
Yes, thank you, Luna. I love this page. This shows a fairly detailed report showing IReady Math Diagnostic. It's an excellent example of the sort of reports that schools should be showing that your students' teachers, should be showing after they take one of these diagnostic assessments. You can see it gives very good information on various domains. And often these formative assessments will generate reports like this one that give specific suggestions and recommendations for classroom and for home activities. They'll also usually have principal resources that can support specific areas of growth. Usually these are 10 to 15 minute targeted activities and skill builders. You can ask your school for these updated reports really anytime, but I think it's most important to review this information with your student's teacher after the beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year assessments.
Okay, so now I will go over some tips on what to do with your learners' data reports after the assessment and how to further support them. So you can begin by reaching out, and to do that, you can ask your child's teacher for the assessment end of year data report. If your child participated in intervention programming this school year, you can discuss the effectiveness with their teacher. You can also use student data to assist with summer planning, ask your child's teacher about intervention or enrichment options for the school year 2022 or 23. And you can also check the DCPS assessment guide for families for additional resources and helpful tips. And in the next slide, I will briefly go over the guide. So how the guide is organized. This resource was created by the Office of Teaching and Learning to assist families with understanding their students' assessment results. It is currently available in English, Spanish, and Amharic. This guide contains a quick overview of each assessment and helpful tools for families, including questions that you can ask your student's teacher during conferences, So here we have an example of the assessment DIBELS 8. The title of the assessment will always be the first thing you see, followed by a short description of the assessment. So based on the description here on the page, we know that DIBELS is an assessment for students in grades K through 2 and measures students' growth on foundational literacy skills. Then next is the table that shows you who or what grade levels take the assessment and when during the school year they take it. So here we can see that DIBELS is taken 3 times a year. And last is the HAP. Not all the guides have this information, but most will state how long the assessments are. For example, DIBELS is 10 minutes long. The main part of the guide focuses on helpful resources that you, the family, can use. Some of the examples of the resources include links to student results such as mClass Home Connect, which is specific to DIBELS, and the resources also include questions that may help you start a conversation with your students' teachers about their assessment results and how it can be used to better support your child at home.
Great. Thank you for that information. I do have some questions that came in and from folks who registered for the session, and a couple more that are just frequent questions that come up at all of our Parent University sessions. So the first one is about assessments specifically for students K through first. I'm going to go back to the list. To the guide. We had a parent specifically ask about the assessments for K through first and how to prepare those like early learners who are like in kindergarten and getting ready to take assessments.
I can field this one. Those excellent questions. The best way, so these foundational assessments, particularly at kindergarten, first grade, and then also second grade, are really measuring how a student develops naturally as they access the school's curriculum and also literacy and numeracy in its various forms. So it's not a test that can be passed or not passed. So the way that these are assessments that show a risk for non-proficiency, if that makes sense. And I'll slow down for a minute because I see a reminder to allow the translator to catch up. The best way to prepare your students for these assessments are going to sound like very generalized advice for school, which is preparing for foundational literacy assessments would include giving your student lots and lots of opportunities to interact with print, with reading and with writing in particular, lots of opportunities to play with language. Beyond that, more specifically on the day of, again, I have very general advice, such as making sure that your student has had a good night's sleep and that they've had a healthy, filling breakfast before they head to school that day.
Thank you. Can you talk more about the risk of not being proficient? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. So the primary purpose of these assessments is to let the teacher know what sort of resources they may need to bring to bear to bring the student toward grade level proficiency. And this is one of the reasons why the assessment is given 3 times a year, is it gives the teacher multiple points of data to allow them to predict where a student is growing. So risk for non-proficiency by the end of the grade level is basically lets the teacher know how much extra worry, we always worry about our students all the time, but how much extra worry and extra resources should I devote to this student? And there are several categories that we see, particularly with DIBELS, but also with IReady. The first category for a student that is at risk for non-proficiency is that they need strategic intervention. And this lets the teacher know that the student should be receiving some additional, slightly more intensive reading instruction in the particular areas measured in DIBELS. And the student should receive this strategic instruction at least 2 to 3 times a week at the school. And that additional instruction is typically between 15 and 25 minutes a session. If a student is in need of intensive intervention, obviously that will be more intensive. And intensive intervention typically looks like 20 to 30 minutes of targeted sessions 4 to 5 times a week. Both of those sessions both of those categories for non-proficiency are then regularly monitored for progress, what the teacher might call progress monitoring or PMing, where they basically do a quick checkup. It should be every 2 minutes, or excuse me, not 2 minutes, excuse me. It should be every 2 weeks for students who are in need of intensive intervention, and every 4 weeks for students who are in need of strategic support. Students who are at little risk for non-proficiency will only be progress monitored during beginning, middle, and end of year.
Thank you so much for that detailed response. Thinking towards the summer now, we talked about, let me find the slide. We talked about the reports that come out after the end of year assessments that take place. What are some programs that are available in the summer for my child? Will they have access to IReady? Because I know that's what they do for homework sometimes.
All of our currently available programs will remain available throughout the summer. That is a part of the contracting that our office does with those companies. So students will still have access to IReady on demand as often as they like, and IReady will continue to progress in the student's skill level as it always does. The program won't make a distinction between the school year and not the school year. This is also true of Lexia, Zern, and many of the other district-funded programs that can be found through Clever.
So if I see that my child is below proficiency in, for example, this IReady report, how often should I be asking them to complete IReady activities or Zern activities or anything else?
Each of the programs has a slightly different recommendation for how much time should be spent, but typically they ask for between 45 minutes and 60 minutes per week. So you would think of a login, I'm thinking laptop open to laptop closed. I would hope less than 25 minutes per day during the school day. I would not rely on these programs entirely to support the student over the summer. One should also continue to read to the student and have regular reading times or math times available. And there are a host of resources that a parent can purchase that will help to bridge the summer. The one that I'm thinking of particularly is literally called Summer Bridge, right? Going from kindergarten to first grade, going from first grade to second grade. These are available at every bookstore and most grocery stores I've ever poked around in when I was a teacher. But I think most importantly, I come from a background and particular belief in teaching that literacy in particular needs to be authentic. It needs to be real to our students' lives and to their experience, and it needs to speak to them. So finding all of those wonderful literacy experiences within the community, DC's wonderful library system, for example, at a church or a synagogue or mosque, if students attend that regularly, anywhere we can find print that can be applied authentically to the student's experience and student's life, that's where you're going to get the best literacy growth.
Thank you. Another question that came in is about accessing the data to make these decisions about summer and the activities to do with students. How does a parent access the reports that they need?
So these reports are usually not available through the student's login screen. And so what you'll want to do is at the end of the year, you'll want to ask the parent for, or you'll want to ask the teacher for them at your final conference. Our end of year diagnostic assessments actually end a week or two before the end of the school year to allow for this. So I believe this year it ends the second week of June. And so that still gives a week or 2 weeks for teachers to print out these reports and send them home. And of course, to have summer conferences and make recommendations specific to your student.
Thank you. And are the reports available in my home language? At home, we speak Spanish. Will I be able to access this report in that, or how can I make sure that I receive this information in a language I understand fully?
It's going to be different for every assessment. Many of our assessments do have Spanish reports available, but especially when we get into like the secondary space, I would encourage families to always reach out to the teacher or to language services to assist if there's something, or even just reach out to us if there is ever a report that they need assistance with translating.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that we have is, let me get back. There you go, to questions. The last question I have is, as a parent, what should be my main takeaway during the spring season of assessments?
That is an incredible question. And I have to think deeply about this, because the answer is different in the elementary space versus the middle school and secondary space. At elementary school, as an elementary school assessment expert, I'm always looking over that summer divide, right? The school year never ends, the learning never ends, the growth never ends. So as a parent, I would be looking at the end of year assessment for the student, particularly if they were still at risk for non-proficiency in DIBELS, or if they were shown to be a grade level or more than one grade level below in IReady math. And I would take those questions to the teacher. How can I specifically support my child in these domains, which is a domain is when we divide up big subjects like reading or math into its component parts. And what can we expect to see beginning at the next school year in place to support my student?
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple of other things. We talked about anxiety, test anxiety in this session. We do have another a recording around like worry and anxiety in children in general. If you would like to see that recording, it's linked in the description box below this video, because this is going to be YouTube. We also went through, just going off your last question, the last question, Jason, you mentioned what questions to ask the teacher. This guide has really great questions that families can bring out to their child's teacher. And the link to the guide, to access the guide, which is in English, Spanish, and Amharic, will be linked in the description box for this video. And then finally, last week, we had a session around ways, like summer activities for families. And some of them are like fun, experimental, like camp. Others are online, or they might be through the DC Public Library that you mentioned, Jason. So we have that also in a document, which will be linked in the description box. And some of those are, some of them have a cost, some of them have, you can get financial support or financial assistance, and some of them are free. So that will also be linked below.